Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first panel. We are very, very fortunate to be able to set the scene for the rest of the conference and to discuss the complex region we are living in. Dilawar already discussed some of the features of this region, one in which we have seen a chapter of a war being paused, but not closed, one in which dialogue is not really taking place, and one in which there is fragmentation, growing instability, but also potentially one in which there is opportunity for more countries to shape their own vision, their own role. So we are here to discuss the Middle East evolving power landscape and to see if we're moving towards a different balance of power. We are very fortunate to have 4 distinguished panels with us who have extensive experience, and I'm sure that our distinguished friends will help us understand the roles, vision, calculations of some of the main players in the region. With us today, we have Randa, Senior Fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, but also Director of the MENA program at the Stimson Center in Washington. We have Janardhan Narayanappa, who is the Research Director at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy in Abu Dhabi. We have Alireza Ghezili, a researcher, senior researcher at the Institute for Political and International Studies in Tehran. And last but not least, Seyed Mohammed Hosseini, who is a former Iranian ambassador in Saudi Arabia. Welcome to all of you. I think it's just fair to start with you, Randa, to try to get a little bit of a better sense of what the US vision is under the Trump administration. What is it the Trump administration is trying to achieve, that wants to achieve, and how does it perceive the US role in the region? Is retrenchment part of it, and how will this calculation affect the region trajectory in the future? Randa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aniseh, for your kind intro. First, thank you, Dr. Dilawar and MERI for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be at this conference, and it's also always a pleasure to be back in Erbil. So, I mean, yesterday, Mr. Trump, when asked about the ongoing negotiations in Gaza, on the Gaza deals in Egypt, the ongoing negotiation in Egypt, his response was, Hamas is fine. So, the name of the game is unpredictability, at least for us who are following US policy in the region. It's hard to pin down what are the elements of a Trump doctrine, if we can put it in the region. However, I'm going to try the impossible and try to identify some of the elements of this emerging Trump doctrine after the first 10 months of his second term. I think what we see is that as far as the Middle East is concerned, his emphasis is going to be on mega negotiated deals. The May 2025 trip to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, and to UAE, where agreements in hundreds of billions of dollars were signed. So I think this is going to be an important part of their approach, not only to the Middle East, but also to other parts of the world. So negotiated deals, massive economic agreements, limited use of military force. He came into power saying, gone are the broad, long-term entanglements that the US has engaged in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And at the same time, he showed his readiness, even when negotiating with Iran, to launch a military strike on Iran last June, which shows to the fact that when he sees fit, the US will be ready in limited military engagement the engagement with respect to Iran was 12-day long. And then the major lens through which the administration, but also Mr. Trump, sees Middle East is mostly countering Chinese influence in the region, Chinese political influence and Chinese economic influence. Now, when it comes to, there is this perception and about retrenchment, that the US is withdrawing from the region. And if you look at different measures of retrenchment, you know, whether be it military power, physical military power that's present in the region, or whether it is, you look at strategic priorities, you know, vis-a-vis the region, or whether you look at how they project power in the region. It's very clear that they are not withdrawing, but at the same time, they are interested in a different form of engagement and a different form of projecting power. They are very much, for example, interested in over-the-horizon kind of engagement, use of drones, use of cyber. They are very much interested in intelligence sharing. But they still, and they are very much interested in outsourcing some of these functions or tasks that the US, when the US was the unipolar power in the region, performed at the time. They are interested in outsourcing some of these functions and tasks to regional countries, which are increasingly assuming the role of, you know, regional powers, if we can put it this way. I don't think we have moved, building back to the topic of the panel, we have moved back to total we have moved away from the unipolarity of the 1990s to 2010, right? Where the US was the unchallenged power in the region, economically, militarily, whatever. But we are in a transition towards some kind of a fragmented multipolarity, where you have regional actors, again, assuming more of a role in setting the political tempo. Still, the US military power, it remains indispensable, in my opinion. It's still the main security guarantor for a lot of the countries in the region. It still underpins Israeli military superiority in the region. And its economic heft and leverage still is paramount in the region, although the fact that you have the countries in the region more increasingly adopting hedging strategies and balancing their their alliances, and more importantly, you know, they are occupying more and more special niches, whether it is mediation, whether it is convening, and that we are going to see more of that. Now, the perception, sometimes, as you know, politics is about perception. There is this perception in the region, but also internationally, about the US retrenching or US leaving the Middle East. And this perception has really created opportunities, you know, for countries like Russia, for countries like, you know, China, to basically test the waters and start developing its alliance networks in the region.
Thank you, Randa. Definitely some of the points that we are going to come back to, I'm sure. But you open up also the chapter of opportunity for some of the countries as well. So maybe Janardhan, coming to you, if you know, Gulf countries are actually seeing opportunities in what might be the U.S. retrenchment. Obviously, you know, mixed signals. There is on one side everything that Randa has been saying in terms of this evolving relationship and involvement in the region. On the other, you see this defense pact with Qatar coming up. So I think there is obviously, you know, a shift in the position of the U.S. in the region, but also a question mark about where that is going to move forward. And I think this is consequential for the Gulf countries, which had a strategic alliance, have a strategic alliance with the US. And I think on one side, you might see that the recent development challenging some of the assumptions that have been made for decades, but on the other, this might be seen as an opportunity for the Gulf countries to reshape their own vision, their own alliances, their own ability to create, if you wish, a security architecture. So can you help us get a little bit of a sense of the debate in the Gulf? Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, MERI, for inviting me, and Dr. Dwelber was very smart. He brought me an Indian. I'm Indian head to toe, but I've been living in the Gulf, in the UAE for 25 years, so I wear a Khaliji hat, so he gets 2 for the price of 1, right? But, you know, let me just go back a bit and talk about, there is no consensus. I'm actually surprised, Randa, that you sort of agree that there is a fragmented multipolarity. I thought you will sort of drive the American sort of narrative, which generally, perhaps your background from the Middle East helps.
American.
Yes, so that's good. But there is really no consensus still in the world about whether this is a unipolar world, a bipolar world, a tripolar world, a multipolar world. Some of my friends in the Middle East actually seem to suggest that it is an apolar world, simply because there are no poles for one to go around. So this could well be an apolar world. And while it may be difficult to make a case about this being a multipolar world from a geopolitical perspective, I think it's easy to make a case from a geo-economic perspective. And, you know, just in terms of how this is a world driven by geoeconomics rather than by geopolitics, let me just give you an example. In 1995, the combined GDP of the emerging 7 countries was half that of the G7. And by about 2015, they were almost on par. And it is assumed that by 2040, the GDP of the emerging 7 countries will be double that of the G7 countries. Now, take those numbers with a pinch of salt, but the fact and the trajectory is very clear that from an economic perspective, it is not a unipolar, bipolar, or a tripolar world. It is a multipolar world. And it's not just a multipolar world in that sense. I would like to add a few more M's to that. It's actually a multi-aligned world. It's a multi-networked world. It's also a multiplex world. I don't think we pay enough attention, but it's not just the state actors which are involved in making this world anymore. It's the non-state actors, it's private companies. Just those 5 big tech companies in the United States are worth more than $10 trillion. And that's the 3rd largest economy in the world. Imagine the sort of agency that they have on global politics and economics. So when you put all these, you know, things together, this is, you know, in a unipolar or a bipolar world, many of those countries which don't really have the agency to make a mark can either be on the menu or at the table. Whereas what a multipolar world does is that you can be on the menu and at the table, both at the same time. And this is where I think the Gulf countries really fit in. You know, 25 years ago, when I first got to the Gulf, someone asked me, what is India's foreign policy all about? And I told them it's pretty sophisticated, but nobody ever gives it enough credit. I said it's good with the Americans, good with the Russians, good with Iran, good with the GCC countries, good with the Palestinians, and good with the Israelis too. I said, what sort of a foreign policy is this? Either you're with us or you're against us. But look, 25 years later, where the Gulf countries are. They're all following a very multi-aligned foreign policy because it's a multipolar world. And, you know, actually, some people are suggesting that there's an existence of a 4th pole, apart from, you know, the United States, the EU, and China. The 4th pole is made up of countries like India, the emerging powers, the Gulf countries in particular, because they are just about 5 hours of flight away from each other. So connectivity is really a very key point in this multipolar world, and the Gulf countries are no longer just Middle Eastern players, they are global players. In fact, I've been using the term global Gulf a lot. They have become very, very proactive players around the world for some of the things that Randa already mentioned. And they don't derive their power from politics or their military prowess. They derive their power from what I call many C's, from capital, from commerce, from collaboration, from connectivity, from cyber, which is tech. There is compromise, there is climate issues that they're involved in. So all these C's is where they get their energy from and agency from. And just to indicate how much they're aligned away from the Western world, which they were aligned with until about 2000. Currently, the Gulf-Asia trade bill is about $750 billion. The US and the EU put together is about $250. Just with China, it's $300 billion. So, 2009 sort of marked why this is a multipolar world. France and the United States were the ones that bid for the Baraka nuclear plant, civil nuclear plant in UAE. It was not France and the United States that got it. It was South Korea that got it. So that sort of demonstrated again that they were looking at the world from a very economic perspective, not so much from a political perspective. And again, going back to my earlier point, I think it's a bit of a flatter world. It's not flat yet. Thomas Friedman once said that the world is flat, but I don't think it's flat. I think it's become a lot flatter, becoming flatter by the year. And we must recognize that in this era of technology-driven economy, technology-driven politics, in a sense, there are far more options than just the United States. And maybe at a later stage, I can talk to you a little bit about how this entire security dynamics are changing. But I think just to finish off, if you look at how the Gulf positions itself, it's very Middle Eastern in its orientation. It's Arab, it's Muslim, it's Middle Eastern in terms of geography. Geography is very important as well. The geo in the geo-economic, geopolitical is also about geography, because where you're located, what you have, how you can connect also matters a lot. And in terms of their trade, they're very aligned with the East, Asia, and for lack of really credible security alternatives, they are still with the West. So in a sense, they have the best of all the worlds, and along with economic diversification, they've had foreign policy diversification, and they've had security diversification as well.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, we'll probably come back to the security component as well, as this will be important to look at in terms of whether this multipolarity and, if you wish, diversification away from the US, it's also going to happen on the security realm, or if this is less likely. But let's go to Iran. Obviously, we talked about this multipolarity, this fragmentation, and I think Iran has had the Global South vision for many years now. It sees itself as part of this vision and a key player in this vision, if you wish, with its shortcomings. Obviously, it's a vision in which there are significant players, but you may say that it didn't really translate in all the impacts that Iran was wishing in economic terms, in security terms. So can you tell us a little bit about what's the current vision from the Iranian side, given the recent development, given the war? What is the likely trajectory? Are we seeing Iran shifting its calculation when it comes to the regional policy, or are we seeing more of the same?
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Dilawar and Middle East Research Institute for invitation, and it's a pleasure to be with you today and share my views on this important issue. Well, what happened in the last few months has changed the situation in the region, and maybe we are on the brink of a transformation or a deep change in the region. So here are my takes. I would like to raise or highlight some of the important points. In the last few months, we witnessed that the existing order has failed to ensure peace and security in the region. International law or ignored or abandoned. the international institutions and organizations are unable to address the challenges. Israel doesn't adhere to any principles of international law and has expressed its vision that wants to be hegemon power of the region. And in this perspective, enjoys the full endorsement of the US administration. All kinds of supports, internationally, politically, economically, intelligence, logistic, military, all sorts of support. There are real doubts that Trump foreign policy, which is famous, this phrase, that peace through strength, will lead the region to a genuine peace because it doesn't address the root causes of the crisis. And Israel seizes the opportunity to make up its shortcomings, its geopolitical shortcomings. As you know, since the October 7, all its military action is aimed to establish a kind of de facto buffer zones in some countries. Maybe this will extend to other countries of the region, and has vowed that Israel will hit its opponents wherever they are. And the last point, maybe the most important, is the US commitments are vulnerable to whether unwillingness to fulfill it, or to abandon it, or ignore it, or to compromise to another commitment. So here are the facts that we can take from the last developments in the region. In these circumstances, in these situations, the idea of multipolarity is considered as an alternative to the actual or existing order. But we need to study multipolarity very carefully. There are some fundamental questions to be addressed in this study. What do we expect from multipolarity? Whether multipolarity aims to ensure peace and stability as a mechanism for the region, or we seek multipolarity to diversify trade partners to achieve economic developments, to achieve certain goals. Is multipolarity a response to Trump's approach to the foreign trade, which is transactionalism? Or maybe the last and most important question is whether the Middle East want to be a customer of the multipolarity, or the countries of the region want to play an active role to shape a multipolar or a block of power in a multipolar order. So here I stop in order to have more discussions on these questions. But these questions are very fundamental, and the answer to these questions clarifies the situation for all players. Thank you.
Let me get the ambassador perspective and follow up to this initial assessment to get a sense of what is now, given the 12 days war, given everything that has happened over the past year and a half, what is Iran's current perception of its role in the region? Does it perceive that it continue with the kind of policy that it has carried out now for decades? Or is there any debate about changing its posture, its relations? It's a key pillar of security and regional relationship over the next few years.
Many thanks to you, and especially many thanks to Dr. Delawar. I really appreciate and admire his competence and capability of organizing such a meeting. It is an honor for me to participate. That is my first participation in this MERI conference. And I hope we can communicate what is our understanding. I'm not the official spokesman of foreign affairs or Iranian government, but I will try to share my understanding of the situation, what is happening. Well, it is difficult for the last person to continue because most of, perception has delivered and it remains a little. But my understanding of situation, because apart from being a diplomat, I was professor at university, international law and international relations. That is a mixture of academic understanding and political and diplomatic understanding. That is the mixture of such a situation. Well, we are living in a world that is in a radical changes in all dimensions, from high-tech technologies, let's go from AI, to great changes in geopolitics, geoeconomics. Everything is under changing, a radical changing. Suddenly, we witnessed the October 7th, and after the events comes very, in a very bad situation. Iran, as a state which herited a great emperor in the history, always has been the pillar of stability in the region. And if you look in the history, the millennium history, you will see that Iran always played to stabilize the region, because the stability and the security of the region is for our sake. If we want to play our historical role, we must have a stable region. Otherwise, we will lose. I give an example. For example, with the intervention, I call it positive intervention of China in agreement 10 March, Iran accepted very soon. Why? Because that was not Iran who was seeking the rupture of the relation. We are looking to have a good relation with all the countries in the region and out of the region. And we accepted. Accepted because for us, the security of the region is essential. But what is the problem? First, the offshore balancing and direct intervention of the power like America and before the Britain always has a negative sense of instability in the region. Because America once had offshore balancing policy, and sometimes now it is direct intervention. Second, Iran always keeps the sovereignty of all countries in the region. We are against all intention of fragmentation of the region, because we are very sensitive to see that, for example, the out of the region powers comes, and yes, we welcome the power, but positive intervention, as I mentioned, for example, China. China, for example, why we accepted? Because China now plays a positive intervention or mediation, let's say. But unfortunately, you see that, for example, that very genocide of the Gaza, the US supports totally, 100%. And now officially there are many, more than 65,000 of victims, innocent victims, but America is still support. We want the equality for all citizens, for all countries, the minorities, the majorities. And that is the reason that Iran has a very, very good relation with Kurdistan. Recently, you see we had the agreement and we support all minorities, all the citizens, regardless of the culture, the religion, the, let's say, races. That is our policy. And maybe later on, in a very concrete question, I will answer the concrete response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll come to the concrete question then, for sure. Randa, let's come back to you. You talked about, like the countering China pillar as one of the fundamentals in the region from the U.S. perspective and the Trump administration. Can you give us a little bit of more of a sense of what are the concrete steps and how is the U.S. going to take that policy into practice when it comes to, for instance, a relation with regional countries such as the Gulf countries, mixing that with the need to also make sure that the U.S. remains the main dominant player in the region, if you wish.
I think the way they are going about it is mostly by maintaining, in a way, their military indispensability to countries, especially in the GCC, through basically making it more difficult for China to operate in the region in terms of its cellular networks or its use or access to advanced chip technology, by imposing punitive sanctions on countries that are violating some of these red lines that the United States has been communicating with its partners and allies in the region. There is, in terms of also China's, it's difficult for me to see beyond the role that China played in 2023 in mediating this détente between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Beyond the economic role, beyond the economic benefits that China is seeking, beyond basically economic diplomacy, it's not clear to me that China has yet made the shift to expanding its role in the region into different fields. Even the 2023 mediation role, the agreement has no enforcement mechanisms. It's very much a gentleman's agreement, between the two countries. But China at the same time is building and benefiting from the need of countries, especially in the Gulf, to diversify their economies, to diversify their political alliances, especially in the especially in the last 2 years. We are seeing more and more of that taking place. And so China is very much in an opportunistic, entrepreneurial mode of action right now. And but the United States, at the same time, is unwilling to concede that much of its role that it has enjoyed, at least with this administration and with this president. If we had a different administration, like, for example, if we had a Harris administration, I think you would have seen more and more shifting away from the region than it is the case with this administration. I think this administration is very much looking at the Gulf, particularly through the economic lens, through the investment lens, and the Chinese angle is important, but the priority remains is economic investments and economic deals.
Thank you. Janardhan, obviously China is a significant economic partner, as you outlined, for the Gulf countries, but obviously there are also other outside players, like for instance we have seen the Saudi-Pakistan pact recently announced. At the sideline of this, there is also attempts by the Gulf countries to take things, if you wish, in their hand. After the Doha attack by Israel, we have seen the summit by Gulf countries. Does this translate into something concrete, or is this hedging, as you were saying before, rather than actual capability to move away from the security arrangement from the US? Are we likely to see a more diversified, more self-reliant Gulf security arrangement? Are we likely to see the interference of external players other than the United States, or are we going to see more of the same, and therefore, besides the rhetoric, this relationship, the security ones with the United States, is going to continue?
Yeah, thanks, Aniseh. Actually, Randa is making my life simpler. I assume that it would be difficult trying to say that there is a world out there in the Gulf beyond the US, but many of the things that she's saying actually ties up with what I have in mind. To understand really the security dynamics, I think it's important to look at some of the mechanisms that the Gulf countries have employed in the last decade or so. I think part of this being a multipolar, multi-aligned, multi-networked, multiplex sort of world also has meant that multilateralism is not working very well for them. And as a result, they have used another M, which is minilateralism. And minilateralism has really helped them diversify their economic, diplomatic, and security dynamics. Now, I'll come to the security dynamics in a bit, and just look at how they are adjusting to a multipolar world. They are with I2U2, India, Israel, United States, and the UAE together. They're also with BRICS at the same time. It's a sort of balancing act with China. Then they also have the UFI, UAE, France, and India, which are working together as well. That's another trilateral that's going on. So the Gulf countries are basically positioning themselves as middle powers. And middle powers are really the sort of swing states that the world required and didn't have for a very long time. With the sort of agency that they have now, they're beginning to serve as swing states. And all this is happening because I think we are witnessing re-globalization. We saw the age of globalization, then people talked about de-globalization, but I think really what we are seeing is re-globalization. The rules of engagement are being rewritten, the supply chain mechanisms are being rewired, recalibration of the entire model that we knew in the world is changing. I mean, look at the sort of agency. It's not just the IMF and World Bank anymore. You have the New Development Bank, you have the AIIB, you have a whole lot of other institutions from where many other countries which couldn't garner support or have some traction are beginning to play around now. And look what the UAE is doing. It's building its own minilateral network of countries like New Zealand, Singapore, with Switzerland. So a host of countries, all small countries, but have enough traction, enough agency in the economic domain to try and come up with a minilateral framework. Now, why are they going about doing all this? Because, as I said already, multipolar world. Now, let's connect that with the security dynamics. For a long time, the US has been the principal security guarantor in the region. And they talked about the end of free riders. That's a conversation that's been going on. Look, there's no doubt that many other countries, including the Gulf, China, Japan, India, South Korea, all these countries were riding piggyback on American naval presence in the region. So we were free riders in a sense. Now, if the United States really wants to put an end to that free riders business, then it needs to create an alternative security mechanism. But it has not done so, because the minute it becomes less of a security player in the region, then its whole agency, its whole sort of influence in the region diminishes. Randa was talking about China bringing together Saudi Arabia and Iran was, sort of notional, not much in it. But really, the whole idea of these two countries coming together was not China's plan originally. It was the United States' plan. Obama talked about cold peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but that was never put into place. So actually what China did is not demonstrate what it can do, it actually demonstrated that the United States is never serious about this, and it went about doing whatever it did. What the impact of that will be in the long run, we'll wait and watch, but I think a part of it was already demonstrated in terms of Iran not behaving the way it should have behaved during the Gaza crisis. Now, what are we seeing? There are a host of other countries that have come into play. Most of the deals that the Gulf countries are signing now with their Asian partners are comprehensive partnerships. Comprehensive includes security dynamics. India and UAE and Saudi Arabia, they never had joint naval exercises or air exercises or military exercises before 2018. It's all happening now. Why now? China, UAE, and Saudi Arabia never had those exercises before. It's all happening now. Why now? You have South Korea and UAE working together on those security dynamics. I already talked to you about UAE, France, and India working together. Trilateral air exercises, trilateral military exercises, and naval exercises all happening now. So the point is, at the end of the day, for the first time, you have a situation where the biggest producers of oil and the biggest consumers of oil are from Asia. And if indeed the United States, which actually has borrowed a template from Asia in terms of focusing on the transactional aspect of it, rather than the ideological or the political or the security dynamics, actually the US is learning from the Gulf Asia model. And if that really is the case, and the US doesn't want to put boots on the ground and doesn't want to really get involved in the mess it has already gotten involved in, it has to see that there is greater deal of other countries taking up those security. Just one example, often people say that China and India are big powers in the region, they don't do enough. But just between 2008 and 2018, both these countries escorted roughly about 8,500 naval ships in the region's waters of Aden and of Somalia. And of that, more than half of it was non-Chinese and non-Indian flagships. So we must understand that the nature of security is changing in the world. It's no longer traditional security that really matters. Non-traditional security is very important. And for non-traditional security, you don't need the might of the American aircraft carriers in the region. You need smaller countries taking charge of escorting their supply chain routes, protecting their supply chain routes, escorting their oil tankers, fighting against piracy. And these are things that many other countries which are partners with the Gulf can do. So what I see are already seeds of collective security mechanism, and we will definitely have more dynamics added onto it as we move forward.
Thank you. Randa, can I add quickly something?
Yes, of course.
Anyway, in terms of the shift to middle powers and the role that middle powers play, I think there are limits. And there are limits to the influence and the role that middle powers can play. And in the case of the Gulf countries, there are hard ceilings. In military confrontations, there are certain limits to how much soft power can go, right? And where hard power really matters. There are limits because of population, legitimacy, sustainability. These countries rely on rents, rely on sustained income from certain, from oil, from gas. As we are moving toward a more and more oil independent, how much their power, which is based in their economic, heft, will be able to be leveraged and maintained. And usually, typically, middle powers are not the ones who sets the rule in a regional orders. I mean, they can be spoilers, can be facilitators, but they are not rule setters. And so, I mean, as we are thinking about this move toward fragmented multipolarity, I think we also need to be aware is about the limits that middle powers like the UAE, like Qatar, face in moving forward.
Thank you. Janardhan, to hear.
Finally, Randa has given me some room to differ with her. Well, I don't think the Gulf countries are using soft power. I think they're using smart power, right? I mean, look at the might of the...
Soft is smart.
Soft is smart, but I think smart is smarter, in a sense.
Soft is smart.
Yeah, I think what, look at the United States. In terms of using all its hard power in the region, I think has earned more enemies than friends. Yeah. This is a lesson that both the Gulf countries and other middle powers in the world are learning. They don't want to get involved and make the same sort of mistakes that some of the big powers and the superpowers have made in the past. So they will tread along very carefully. They will extend their influence, basically, again, from a geo-economic perspective, and make those gains. I mean, you go laughing to the bank counters when you follow the economic perspective rather than the political perspective. I think somewhere, again, this is where smart power comes in again. They will neither use the sort of hard power that they experimented with during the first decade of this century. They built capacity, actually, during that decade. During the second decade, they put that out in play during the Arab uprising. It didn't sort of work. But I think henceforth, it'll be a combination of both that hard and soft power that they will employ. And again, there is an example of smart power for you.
Thank you. Mr. Ghezili, let me come back to you with the China angle, but broadening it up. There is obviously a sense that the Iranian deterrence might have failed, given the 12 days war, given that the forward defense didn't really manage to deter Israel and later the United States from attacking Iran. And we are seeing, obviously, there is a debate inside Iran about what should replace or substitute or add up to basically bolden up the kind of deterrence that has been in place for decades now. Now, the question of China and Russia comes to mind. Obviously, the relationship between Iran and China and Russia is a complicated one. There is obviously the component that we have been discussed about the strategic agreement with both countries, actually. But in terms of concrete benefits and concrete strategic and security support, are these countries able to actually provide any support to Iran? Because during the war, they didn't really intervene. Now there are questions about air security, air defense systems potentially being deployed by these countries. Is there anything concrete in security terms that Russia and China can do to protect Iran or to double down on the deterrence which has supposedly failed?
Well, thank you for this very, very broad question. Actually, the relations between Iran and Russia and China are very good. We have signed a framework agreement for long-term, for strategic cooperation. And just last week, this framework was approved by the parliament in Russia and now as operational, it comes to the phase of operation. So we have a long history of cooperating with Russia in terms of different aspects. I mean, even defense cooperation. So we buy some equipments from Russia. It's nothing to hide, and we receive some help from China as well, but China is a bit different. China's primarily interest is in the region is energy and economics and trades. And the peace and the stability comes under this title, so under this chapter. Look at the statistics, for example. China's trade with Middle East countries was about $300 billion in 2021. And in 2024, it raised to almost $600 billion. China enjoys two pivotal credits. One is that China has been able to maintain generally good relations with all countries in the region. And China is viewed as an impartial or neutral and across the region, and a pragmatic partner to all countries. The second credit that China enjoys is that China has benefited from the US presence in the region as the principal guarantor of the peace and security in the region. So this gives China more rooms for having trade without any let's say commitment or any serious involvement in the security of the region. But I think this role is evolving. There are many expectations from not only Iran but other countries in the region that China and Russia take more responsibility in the developments of the region. So coming back to your question, well, yes, we are updating our defense capability. That is the lesson that we had from the last June attack against Iran. But our strategy is self-sufficient and rely on our own capability. You know, maybe not only Iran and Iran defense system, but whole world was surprised because we were confirming the 6th round of negotiations with United States, and 2 days before, I mean, we fixed the date for Sunday, and on Friday we were attacked. So it was a failure for those who think that the war is the best resort to solve the problems. That is for sure. Those who believe that war is a response to the crisis, they have failed, as we, I mean, the people in Iran and the government and our system. Well, system was maybe surprised for some hours, but we had this successful reactivating our system, and we started to defense. So yes, we are updating our systems. We are reviewing our weak points, and there is an expression that if you want peace, prepare yourself for war. We are not in favor of war, absolutely not. We believe that the problems should be solved through negotiations and an agreement and through diplomacy. The war is not a solution. Even the wars ends in negotiations, in diplomacy. So, but we, under the menaces of the Israel, yes, we are updating our system, we are reviewing our system, we are increasing our capacity to defense, and this is the responsibility of all governments.
Thank you very much. And I think, to follow up on this, I think one of the surprising outcome, if you wish, of the 12 Days War was that all parties left Iraq aside. They didn't want Iraq to become a theater of the confrontation. The US obviously withdrew its forces just days before the attack, but also Iran really didn't activate its back group here. So I think it's interesting for us to get a sense from you, Ambassador, also of what is Iran's current perspective on Iraq, Iraq's role in the region, Iraq's role in a future tension, should it rise again with Israel and the United States? How does he perceive, obviously, this strategic partnership that has been going on for decades evolving? And if you can give us a little bit of a sense of, what is the perception from Tehran?
Thank you very much. First, I must refer to the point that Iraq has a very long history. You know that. That is not the question of today. It goes back, let's say, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. And second, we do have many cultural and racial integration of Iraqis, okay? And many of the greatest scholars of Iranian scholars, even the Imam Khomeini, was graduated from Iraq's Hawza, religious school. Even Ayatollah Sistani, now the great Barjaiya in Najaf, he comes from Sistan of Iran. Okay, and that is, I'm insisting, but for some people, especially for European or American, they don't know our history. We have the same culture, the same perception. Okay, I'm not talking about the political. Later on, I will come back to the political. Yes, it's true that we had 8 years of war between two countries. But as soon as the war finished, you have seen that Iran and Iraqi nations, they came together. In this year of Arba'in, we had around 4 million Iranian who pilgrimed in Karbala, okay? But Iran and Iraq are two states, separate states, has its own interest, or, national interest, okay? And it doesn't mean that we and Iraqis have exactly in all dimensions the same perception, okay? But in a high-level strategy, we look, and the same Iraqis, we want that the region to be stable, because for any kinds of activities, we do need the security in the region. I insist again, Iran is a country that focuses on security more than other countries. Because for us, for 90 million population and this great geography, we do need stability and security. Then, I think, as I'm aware, that there are a very good negotiation between two countries during the war, after the war, before the war. And the strategy, the great strategy didn't change. Yes, there is the question of Hashd Shabi as a militant, but that is not all affairs, that is Iraq's internal affairs. As the same in Lebanon, we say, yes, we support resistance, any kind of resistance against occupation. I repeat, against occupation. But we are not who decide that you must, for example, comes to the military or not. For Hashd Shabi, Iran declared officially that it is the decision of government of Iraq. They can decide whatever they want, because that is not all affair. Yes, there are some Shiites, sometimes they have the cultural relation, but it doesn't mean that Iran can or want to interfere in the internal affairs. And the same as the others.
Randa, you had a quick, yeah.
Ambassador, allow me, because I hear this talk a lot. to be very honest, whether it's in setting like this or in track 2 settings. Iran seeks stability. I'm not questioning that.
Next one.
I agree with you. Iran seeks stability. The problem in my mind is how to square this interest of Iran in having regional stability, stable countries, where basically you have non-state armed groups in places like Iraq, like Lebanon, that are funded by Iran, that have been trained by Iran, that have been weaponized by Iran, that are basically contributing and causing the state system to be fragile, which, as we all know, fragility is a direct driver of instability. So help me square this interest with the actions. That's really, I'm honest in asking this question because it's a question that comes to my mind all the time.
Ambassador, can you wait? Let me take a few questions from the audience, and then you make sure to address this question as well. Okay? One second. Okay. Let's have a few questions from the audience. One on the back here, if there is a mic. Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
Vladimir van Wilgenburg, Dutch journalist from Kurdistan Chronicle. I have a question to Mr. Seyed Hosseini. So after the fall of the Assad regime, Iraq, they restored their relations with the new authorities in Syria. But Iran seems to be still very critical of the new government in Syria. Could you explain the Iranian position on Syria, basically?
Great question. Anyone else from the audience? No? Okay, I have a question about the US policy in Iraq as well, Randa, for you. Obviously, there is lots going on with the agreement to withdraw, with the pressure for the PMF to disband, pressure on maximum pressure. I want to get a sense, if you may, of what is the trajectory of this bilateral relationship. Is it moving to this strategic partnership, security partnership that Iraq wants, or is Iraq seen as a threat, especially when it comes to Iran, from the US, and therefore is more unlikely to see that kind of security arrangement shifting? And if no one else is asking a question, then yeah, one sec. Also, Janardhan, also when it comes to you, the vision from the Gulf countries towards Iraq, I think is very important. Obviously, there is lots when it comes to connectivity, economic integration, but if you can tell us also where does Iraq sit when it comes to the Gulf calculation? Okay, and obviously, Mr. Ghezili, come back to the Iran point. Okay, Mr. Hosseini, you start.
First, answering,
yes.
You mentioned two cases of Hezbollah and Hashd al-Shabi. Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Okay. I will give you a very concrete answer, because not diplomatic answer, because in diplomatic, they just play with the words. Finally, they don't understand what was the reality. Well, let's go to Hashd al-Shabi. I think in this meeting, we do have the Iraqis people, maybe they know. The result and the main reason of having Hashd al-Shabi, it was what? Because of Daesh. It was at the invitation of Ayatollah Sistani and the other great religions. They called the people, they called the Ashayar, the old tribes, to defend their territories. At that time, they asked Iranian government also, at that time it was Soleimani, Seyed Soleimani, they invited, you come and give us your model of Basij, because during the revolution they established, and to defend the countries. Hashd al-Shabi was established for defending the country from spreading the Daesh. You know the history of Daesh, okay? And even the dear brothers in Kurdistan, they touched of the Daesh violence, okay? After that, the Hashd al-Shaabi was supported by the people of Iraqis. Yes, as you, when a country asks the America to come to help, what do you do? Huh? There are so many cases that I mentioned here that America came to help the country at the invitation of, for example, Saddam. Why did you come? You say, because, okay? Then, Hashd al-Shaabi established by the invitation and calling the Marja'iyya, the people, and till now, they played a very constructive role in safeguarding of this country. Okay, let's go to Hezbollah. Hezbollah was established when? In 1983, because of invasion of Israel to south of Lebanon. And that
Ambassador,
history...
just like mindful of time, 1 minute, and then we have to move to the rest.
1 minute?
Yes.
For all the questions? Okay. The same Hezbollah. Hezbollah was established because of invasion, I repeat. As still there is occupation, there is resistance. Resistance comes after invasion. If you, American, wants that all these groups, as you mentioned, non-state groups, comes to be official, okay, push the Israel to withdraw from territories, okay? But regarding a very interesting question, why Iran? Iran, from the beginning, announced officially, even before I come to this meeting, I had a very good meeting with the Iranian representative of Syria's affairs, Dr. Shaybani. I asked the last and the latest position. Iran follows the situation of Syria with a very constructive, let's say, look. We declared we are ready to establish the relation with Syria, but it depends the will of the Syrians. But we have 4 concerns for the Syrians. I just repeat and then I finish. Yeah, first, we have main concerns about Syrian violations of minority rights. We believe that all people of Syria, that is not all affairs, but just concerned like the other countries. We are very sensitive of the minorities' rights. We are very sensitive about territorial occupation. You see now Syria is divided in south, in west. I don't name the countries, you know that. Third, we do have very serious concern about the return of terrorism. You know, terrorism comes because of the vacuum of power. We have a concern. Again, we face the terrorism in Syria. And also the division of the country. Because Syria must have its own territory. Okay, that is all concerns.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Regarding the government, the people choose the government and we respect their choose, okay?
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Ghezili, you had a word. We have 4 minutes, 3 minutes, and then the music is going to start. I've been told so. Yeah, the mic is not working.
Yeah, continue, it'll start.
Yeah.
Try.
As you you said Iran was critical to had some criticism to the new regime in Syria. It was not only Iran, it was many countries. These are the concerns of the international community. The government should be inclusive and participative. No one can be excluded from the new government. So this is the concerns of the international community. It's not only Iran. And Iran has some Iranian nationals in Syria, and we have to have a consular reach to them to protect their interests. imagine that if there is a project, many people think that Iran's presence in Syria was only military. It was not. We had Iranian companies to construct a power plant in Syria. And now they have to leave the country because of the situation. And if the power plant is completed, who benefits from this company? The power plant is for the people. It's not for the government, for this government or that government.
Thank you very much. Janardhan.
Yeah, I think, the good thing about the Gulf countries' foreign policies in the last decade and a half has been that they are non-ideological and they're pragmatic. So Iraq is no longer the sort of buffer between Iran and the rest of the world, in a sense. So they have changed their dynamics. It's economic sense is common sense. So while you want to look at the strategic dimensions, I think it's all rooted in the economic dynamics. Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar, they're all the most important investors here. UAE alone has roughly about $40 billion worth of trade. UAE has invested in energy and infrastructure projects. Qatar and UAE are part of the Development Road project. I think UAE has just announced that it may have some sort of investment envoy for Kurdistan. So even that's taken care of in a sense. The Prime Minister of Iraq was in UAE last week. And then the next, I think, and they've all worked together to counter ISIS in the past. So security dynamics, diplomatic, economic is all working. I think the next trajectory of growth will be in terms of how some of the common partners of Iraq and UAE will work together. That is the Indias, the Chinas, and the Russias all coming together and working together. And since we are short of time, let me also just wind up. It's a multipolar world, and I think while the United States wants a unipolar world, but a bipolar Asia, China wants a unipolar Asia and a bipolar world. India and the Gulf countries want a unipolar Asia and a unipolar world. And the more Trump sort of plays his game to make America great again, he's actually going to make middle powers great again.
Okay. I think we are up with time. I'm sorry, Randa, the music is playing. Well, I wanted to thank the panelists for their very nuanced answers and for providing a great starting point for this rest of the session. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking them.